If your orchestra is going to be successful in any competition or festival, they need to be able to play in tune. Intonation is a big limiting factor for good results, so we're going to go over some tips and tricks in this video to make sure that your students have the technique in order to play Aspen Glow with good pitch. There are two different finger patterns that are used here in Aspen Glow, and I'm going to go over those and explain the nomenclature that I use and what that means. So the first fingering pattern that we have is what I call the major pattern, and in some books it's called the 2-3 pattern because the half step is between the second and third finger for violins and violas. Basically, you have a whole step, then a half step, then another whole step. And this finger pattern is used on the G string and on the D string. The second finger pattern that we have in Aspen Glow is what I call the minor pattern, and some books call this the 1-2 pattern because there's a whole step between the first and the second finger in violins and violas. And for this finger pattern, it's half step, whole step, whole step. If we were to play on the C string, and the cellos do play on the C string quite a bit, it's actually an augmented pattern, or whole step, half step, but the cellos don't get that F sharp on the C string. So if you want to go over that finger pattern on the C string, that might be a good idea anyway, just to reinforce that idea that, hey, you know, in a piece that's in G major, you need to use that extension, that second finger extension on the C string, or for violas, that high third finger for F sharp. It might be a good idea to reinforce this now, because we're not just trying to learn Aspen Glow, we're trying to learn skills that we can apply to all pieces of music. But you're the teacher and you have a limited amount of time, so you need to figure out what you're going to do with that time. And if you don't have a lot of time to put a competition program together, you know, maybe get to that augmented pattern on the C string after you're done with the contest, if that's what your schedule allows for. To develop good intonation for Aspen Glow, again, my philosophy is to simplify as much as possible. So I like to start with the D string, and I like to see if we can establish an in-tune major pattern on the D string. Whole step, half step, whole step. And I have everybody start with open D, then first finger E, then F sharp, G, A, and with cellos, I can have them, and with basses too. They can cross strings so that they get more open strings and we get more reference points to tune to. So cellos are going to play open D, E, F sharp, G, cross strings to A, and then back down, G, F sharp, E, D. Basses are going to play D, E, F sharp, open G, A, and that's just going to keep things more consistent for this. I would rather make sure that they're consistent with tuning that way, and then later on you can have them shift and do things, but from the beginning, again, simplify as much as possible, get your fundamentals in place, and then complicate things later. When they're playing these finger patterns on the D string, go very slowly. Very, very, very slowly. Give them a chance to adjust. And if they're not adjusting, check out Season 1, Episode 3. I did an episode on intonation, and there's some ideas about how you can get your students to learn how to adjust if they're not adjusting on their own, and some tips and tricks on what you can do as a director to get them to start listening and not being satisfied with the first place they put their finger down and moving it around until it's in tune so that they develop active tuning. There are 3 stages of tuning. There's orchestras that play where they're unaware of their pitch, and then the second stage is students that are aware they're out of tune and then make adjustments. And then the third stage is when students understand their pitch tendencies and they make adjustments before they even play the note because they're thinking. And a lot of times in Aspen Glow, with the major pattern on the D string, a lot of times the F sharp isn't going to be high enough. because they have the contrast with the C natural on the A string. And this is primarily on violins and violas. And so you kind of get a hybrid of the F sharp, F natural, and then on the A string you get a C natural that's a little bit too high. So we need to make distinct differences between the major finger pattern on the D string and the minor finger pattern on the A string. Now, once they're perfectly in tune with very long, slow bows, then we can start to speed it up and see if they can adjust faster. So we start increasing the tempo as they go up and down the tetrachord, and that gives them less time to adjust. So we put a little bit of time pressure on there. Now, if they're not able to adjust within that time that you give them, you need to slow it back down because eventually they need to get it. Otherwise, you're going to destroy that culture of tuning that you're trying to build because they're never going to get up to that level of tuning that you require and that you're setting for them. Once we get the major pattern in tune, we can start learning the minor pattern. You can also learn the minor pattern on the D string. It's not going to make that much difference. And what it's going to do is it's going to facilitate better learning for your cellos and basses. If you play it on the A string, what are your cellos going to do with that E? They can either shift or they can leave the E out. In either case, it's more optimal just to learn the minor pattern on the D string, and then you can complicate it later after you've mastered on the D string, and you can move it to other parts of the instrument. Eventually, you're also going to want to teach your violins, particularly your first violins, the minor pattern on the E string, because your first violins go onto the E string a little bit in Aspen Glow, and you need to make sure they can play that in tune because there's an additional set of challenges on the E string that your violins are going to have when it comes to tone. A lot of times they play way too harshly on the E string, and you're going to have to solve that issue before they can even begin to start worrying about playing in tune. And a lot of times also on the E string, they make some left-hand errors. You know, they bend the wrist instead of rotate the shoulder to access the E string, and that's really going to hurt the tuning. So your students are now comfortable playing the major pattern in tune. They're comfortable playing the minor pattern in tune. Okay, what do we have left? We have string crossings. So we need to make sure that we can play consistently on all of the strings with all four fingers. So if we play first finger E consistently in tune on the D string, well, can we play first finger A consistently in tune on the G string? And can we play first finger B consistently in tune on the A string? If the answer is no, it's probably because we're not getting good shoulder rotation. The shoulder rotates in and out for violins and violas. For cellos and basses, the shoulder rotates forward and back so that we can maintain our hand position and get consistent tuning across all four strings. So once we master the finger pattern, now we have to make sure we can use that pattern and that our hand's set up appropriately on all four strings so we get that consistency. And a great way to do that is just playing scales. And you can start off with a G major scale. You know, you can start off, you can go with a D major scale. Those work very well in this key to set those up and just make sure when they're crossing strings that you see everybody rotating the shoulder. I like to use peer-to-peer accountability for this so that their stand partners can watch them rotate their shoulders. It's much easier for students to pair up and do this than for you to watch the whole orchestra and make corrections, especially if you have a large ensemble. It's much more efficient and it saves you lots of rehearsal time. All right, so now your students have good tone and they've established good intonation. What's next? Well, let's try to get to the music in Aspen Glow and start working on the phrasing, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. We'll see you then.